Now today on Tipping Point, we start on a somber mood following the demise of a number of KDF soldiers who died earlier today in a helicopter crash in Kajiado. Our thoughts and prayers go to their families and friends. Nevertheless, the clock is ticking, and need I say ticking fast, as it's now 13 months nigh to the 2022 general elections. Or is it? Why are there deafening sounds of a possible postponement of the election? What does this mean? And are Kenyans ready, or should I be asking whether the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission is ready? And if they'll be ready, should the 2017 election servers be open to enhance transparency of the commission ahead of 2022 general elections? You can imagine we have quite a show lined up just for you this evening. We've opened up our SMS line, that is on 111 444 111. Talk to us via Twitter at Switch TV Kenya, at Fred Mwitidiri.
General elections. How will you conduct the elections if you are short of by 13 billion? That is the importance of this question. And it must be understood, because we want to know what the breakdown is.
Why only constituency officers? Because there has been no budget allocated to us the last 3 years for CBR. It's only now that with the next financial year we have allocated some budget which will now enable the commission to roll out mass voter registration. As we all know, the registration of voters is voluntary, and you cannot, of course, force Kenyans to register. And using minimal or even no resources at all, we have reached out to the numbers which have so far registered.
That is Wafula Chebukati. Tonight, I'm asking you, do you have confidence the IEBC will conduct a transparent, free and fair election in 2022? Do you have confidence the IEBC will conduct a transparent, free and fair election in 2022? That question forms part of the conversation we'll be having with my panel, which constitutes of the Executive Director of the county's Governance Watch and political analyst Kevin Osido. Also in studio is Executive Director of Mzalendo Trust, Caroline Gaita, and Senior Programs Manager, Elog Marcus Agenga. We start off, Kevin, let me start off with you. You've heard what Wafula Chebukati have said this evening. Are we going to have an election next year?
We will have to have an election, because our constitution, similar to, rather different from what has been happening in the past, where, election dates were not in the public domain. The president had the privilege of declaring elections whenever he wanted. Right now, the constitution is very clear that on the second Tuesday of the 5th year in August, we have an election. Despite the teething problems that we have, including budgetary allocations, we are 13 months to an election. We will have to ensure that all stakeholders put their hands on deck and provide Kenyans with an opportunity to exercise their democratic right. And that democratic right, constitutionally, has to be done through an electoral process.
Caroline.
Yes.
The last 2 days have been busy for civil societies in Kenya.
Yes, they have.
I've seen you all of our TV stations, and you're saying we must have an election. However, IEBC is saying for 3 years they have not heard any budget. Are we going to have an election?
We will have an election. As my colleague has said, we are supposed to have an election on 9th of August 2022, and we must have an election. Once we had the 2017 elections, the preparedness for the next general elections should have begun then. So I really don't think we even ought to be having that question of whether we shall have an election. The question that we should be asking ourselves is, are we prepared? And if not, what are the challenges that we are facing, and how do we address them? So the question of whether we should or should not needs not arise. Our preparedness, the preparedness of IEBC, the issue of resourcing, the issue of funding, whether it's the necessary infrastructure, including staffing, to carry their mandate, that's a question that we should be asking, and putting those that are supposed to ensure that the resources are available to account, and expecting the commission to then tell us what they don't have and we then demand or request that those resources that they require are made available. But the issue of elections, whether to happen or not, that should not even be a discussion on the table.
Marcus, we should not be discussing about 2022 general election, if we are going to have or not. However, Brother Ndugu Francis Atwoli, the Kotu Sekjen, just the other day, he said, no BBI, no election. Do you have the same thought that if you do not have the BBI, that you're not going to have an election?
I just want to, first of all, thank you for having us in this studio.
Yes.
But also to contribute to the discussion, I want to join my two colleagues, indicating that we shouldn't be having that discussion because it is provided for in our laws that elections will be held with definite time. That is the 9th of August 2022. So as you heard today, we've been having discussions and we demanded that those provisions be respected. Now, BBI is one of the main, I mean, we recognize that BBI raises certain fundamental legal and constitutional provisions that regarding reforms to our processes.
Yep.
But BBI is just one of the many avenues in which changes can be brought to our laws.
Yep.
So we can pursue other legal avenues to change if we feel there are gaps in our electoral system, the gaps in our legal regime. Let us use other methods, including the parliamentary ways, to be able to effect those changes. But elections must be held, whether we have BBI or not. In any case, election is not to be held at the will of neither the IEBC or the executive or any other Kenyan. We will have election on that day.
All right. Now, my director, please play for me that bite by Mother Karua on the same about the referendum and 2022 general elections.
Obviously, we can't have a referendum before 2022. There is no time. So anybody entertaining that dream, please come off it. Let us agree we already have enough work of correcting the things that need fixing before the next general election. Let's not pretend that we can have two processes unless if the question will come with the elections. It is not possible, in my view. Finally,
Kevin, I know you are a proponent that we should have a referendum. The last time we had a conversation here, you are a proponent that we should have a referendum. Now, looking at the timelines that we have, if we do not hold the referendum by August, we have issues. Do you still hold the same thought that we should have a referendum before 2022 general elections?
Fred, I still hold those thoughts. But remember that the context then is not what we have now. Because as at that particular point in time, we hadn't even had the judicial process.
Yes.
BBI now is on a break at the Court of Appeal. And we, of course, have had the timeline from the president of the Court of Appeal. The judges that are going to listen to this particular case have also been presented, and the parties involved are also having their own day in terms of the preparation process.
Yes.
Now, in my way of looking at this, during that time we also said there is never a right or wrong time to amend a constitution. However, there are timelines that then will be able to guide when we do the referendum, if we are going to do it. Remember, I am using if and when in the same sentence. And then two, timelines that are also going to guide our constitution. And IEBC has also shared their timelines. In my way of looking at this, and Kenya is not unique. Actually, this issue is not unique to our electoral and democratic processes. We have had an IPPG process in the past. The only unfortunate thing that happened with that particular process is the fact that the kind of constitution that we have now is not what we had then. Because remember that even in 1997, just before the IPPG process, the president prorogued parliament and he disbanded it, and everybody went home, like some people say. Right now, it is not an action that we even think about. Of course, the president constitutionally can call off parliament, he can prorogue it, but we have clear timelines that have been put in place to safeguard the interests both of the citizens.
So Kevin, you are saying in essence that you are not going to have a referendum, and you're okay with that?
Given the context, because this is a matter that is in court, we have heard the president's sentiments around this particular issue. So as a Kenyan, I have no problem whether we have a referendum before or after, rather before or together with the election. But remember, the interests that are playing within the BBI process, that is where the point of concern is.
Yep.
Because there are proponents, people who are of the opinion that we should revisit our executive by putting in place certain positions.
Yep.
And that, in my view, is the only point of nexus that I see the electoral process coming into play. Because, Fred, you know that there are lots of things in the BBI that we can do without a referendum.
Absolutely.
But on the questions of 255, 256, the Constitution has clearly given us what we must submit to the people.
Yep.
And if we are of the opinion, therefore, that we must undertake a process where we change positions and ensure that we expand the executive, so be it. But as Mheshimiwa Martha Karua says, if we also safeguard the interests of the citizens, because remember that the referendum is also going to cost huge amounts of resources. So why not combine that referendum with the election together so that we have a seventh ballot? Number two, there are also issues.
That is what DP said, and you disagreed with it the last time.
And I don't talk for the deputy president. The second issue, remember, Frederick, so
Yes.
that my other colleagues can also respond to this,
Yep.
is the issue of boundaries. And the Constitution.
We'll have that discussion.
all right.
We'll have that
Okay.
discussion in a moment.
Thank
But
you.
Caroline, to you,
Yes.
we have seen Wafula Chebukati saying that IBC has been allocated 14 billion
Yes.
against what they had requested of 40 billion. So they have a deficit of over 20 billion shillings.
26.
Are we going to see a free and fair election in 2022? Even though you are insisting we must have an election, are we going to see a free, fair election?
Let me start by what the chairperson of IBC had said at the beginning. He had said that it would cost around 14 billion to hold a referendum.
Absolutely.
And if you look at the electoral process, the sort of infrastructure and systems that would be required to run a referendum, minus, of course, the multiple positions that would be required to be voted for, the resources would not differ too much. But if you look at his statement also, he's talked about the 40 billion being inclusive of everything else, including the boundary. And I think he's issued a statement to the media in that regard, rectifying the media reporting that was held earlier. So in our view then, and just echoing what I said earlier, is 14.6 billion that is being given now is a starting point. So as a country, the question then we start asking ourselves is, where do we then raise the 26.4 billion, his shortfall, that would be required to run a credible, a fair, a transparent and peaceful election. But I don't think that we should use the issue of resources to postpone or to say that we can't hold the elections. If we were saying we are ready for a referendum, then we can be ready and we should be ready for an election.
Marcus, do you agree that where do we get this money? Where do we get we've been allocated, and the way we have seen government working, we've been allocated, ABC has been allocated 14 billion. Where are we going to, kama Wakenya wanasema, twende tukikopa for this exercise? Or are we looking for grants? Is this possible?
Fred, allow me just to, before I answer that question, Kevin has indicated that, you know, and of course, even Mheshimiwa Martha Karua said that we could probably have the questions submitted or subjected alongside the elections.
Yeah.
But I have a problem with that. This is my personal problem. And I'm not speaking for ALOG, of course. But I wanted to say that, I mean, already civil society organizations have big problems having 6 elections on one day. So you want to add
a presidential, a gubernatorial,
yes,
an MP, a woman representative, an MC.
Yes. So you may handle the issue of finance in terms of having saved some money if you were to do the same things, the 2 things on one day. However, the logistical issues, the fatigue, you know, everything around it in one day. So that means, and again, you've had some quarters that saying, let us have multiple questions. You want to have multiple questions on that very day,
Kevin definitely
you have
not
got
agreeing with
six. I know you have got 6 elected positions
Yeah.
with multiple candidates to be elected. That day. It is
Confusion.
confusion, fatiguing. So personally, I don't think it's a good trend. We say have the referendum after election. I think let's just be clear about that. Number 2, the question of
Let's give Kevin a chance.
to
Do you
respond.
agree with that, that a
Referendum
referendum after the 2022 general elections?
I have no problem because that's one of the, as long as citizens have their democratic right and that privilege and opportunity, there is no problem having it before, during, which includes a seventh
Are we
ballot
then,
or
Kevin,
after.
saying that
Yeah.
the whole process of the BBI, that we do away with it because we wanted, and the way I was seeing ODM and the way they were saying, they wanted what they were demanding in the next general election. Before we do it, that we can have the prime minister, we can have all those posts. Are we then saying we do away with the whole process of BBI?
Precisely so. If the pros for having elections before BBI are higher, and also looking at the prevailing circumstances, then why not? And you see, the interesting thing about this particular issue, Frederick, is because we are giving citizens and stakeholders an opportunity to have a conversation, which is not what Kenyans are good at. We are good at shouting at each other, talking down each other. And the beauty of our citizenry is that when we are pushed to the wall and to the corner, then we say, alas, can we have a conversation? And I am very sure that before we get to the 10th or even April next year, you know, God willing, we are going to have a very clear process and procedure, and that is of course going to, you know, bring to an end all these conversations. Why this kind of talk is happening is because we have given too much power and time to the political class. Politicians, you tell them extend parliament, they will be the most happiest people because you're actually having 6 more or 8 more months to earn your salaries. But Marcus and Caro and I and the several of our other colleagues are in the civil society. The reason why citizens have a problem with what Marcus calls fatigue and all these issues is because we have also not invested in proper, effective civic education. Kenyan people are very brilliant, because these are people who walk into a polling station and they know who they are going to vote for.
If we have not conducted the civic education, like Wafula Chebukati is saying that should have started by now,
Precisely.
then are we going to have a free election, free, fair election?
It's a challenge, which therefore means that all of us, and like civil society has already begun the conversations through the electoral conference that just ended today with a very powerful statement. Let stakeholders come together and put to action those statements. So if there are no resources, let's talk to His Excellency the President and the CS Treasury
Broke.
and
We are
Parliament,
broke. We are broke.
Budget Committee, waweke pesa.
Hold that thought. Kalonzo Musyoka, the Wiper party leader, had this to say about the very same issue that we are talking about. Okay.
No.
Okay, let's it's the same conversation. Our director, it's the same conversation. Let us have the Machakos Governor Alfred Mutua. He spoke earlier today about this same quagmire we find ourselves in.
Haya mambo ya IEBC ya kila wakati kulilia pesa inaonyeshana ya kwamba either mambo mawili. Kwanza ni kwamba IEBC pengine haijajipanga, they are disorganized, ama namba mbili, IEBC kuna mpango wa kuifanya isipate nguvu ya kufanya kazi, ndio kura zikipiga 2022 kuwe na ule ukora ambao tumeuona katika nchi yetu ya Kenya.
And let me go to you, Marcus, and ask you, do you think the government, in a way, is indirectly not funding IEBC to postpone the general elections?
I think I want
Is there a feeling in the civil society?
I think sometimes we set our institutions to fail. Because for the IEBC to be able to conduct its mandate, there are resources that are required, whether human resources or financial resources or even support. Now, the 26.4 billion shillings that is still lacking, tell me, what sort of fair process will IEBC undertake when they have no finances to be able to meet those obligations? So while I don't want to speak for the government or whether they're actually setting them to failure, but sometimes, I mean, the impression it gives that you're able to allocate Parliament its money, allocate the executive its money, but for a crucial body like the IEBC, and we know our elections in this country is very, they're very,
Very
emotive.
emotive.
They're very emotive. And so even in the BBI, they identify elections as a major problem. So the body that is supposed to conduct this fair process is being under-financed. So what are you telling the public? Either you're telling the IEBC to go and find its own resources, which it can't. So you rely on the donors, you rely on other citizens of other countries to fund the IEBC. IEBC should be, and I am a firm believer, that IEBC should be funded primarily and exclusively from the public coffers. And
We pay the taxes.
We pay the
It's
taxes.
our
yes.
election.
Let us not have other citizens from other countries paying for our IBC. And they say, remember what they say: "He who pays the piper calls the tune." Why should we wait for other people to fund the IBC?
Caroline,
Yes, right.
in 2017, we know the process, and the court said that the process was fraud. And they blamed the IBC in a bigger way. But IBC, like Marcus is saying, is not prepared. Are we going to see a chaotic 13 months to the next general election? And where do we go from there?
I think one of the things that we seem to be overlooking in this entire conversation, the national conversation, is what brought us here in the first place. We've given a lot of priority to BBI, but sometimes we forget what even got us to the BBI process in the first place. It was a disputed election. It was an election flawed with malpractices that went through a judicial process that was overturned, and there was a repeat. So we had those challenges. That got us to the point of the handshake. And if you look at the handshake, the 9-point agenda, elections was one of the things, that sought to be addressed. But somehow that entire conversation, the challenges, the electoral justice issues, the electoral malpractices, the IEBC preparedness seems to have been overshadowed by this big discussion, especially around the structure of government that is anticipated with BBI. So in my view, it's expecting to put new wine into the same old skin and expecting changes. I don't think that is likely to happen. So the thing that we are saying, and which was a common theme in the conference, is that one, IBC needs to address the challenges that persisted and existed in 2017.
Yep.
That includes the transparency around the servers. Okay. IBC needs to address the issues that were raised about announcing results at the polling center and making sure that the transmission corresponds with what is being captured. So those challenges. But then now we are also saying that for us to go into 2022, we need to build public trust. And that trust can only be enhanced if IEBC demonstrates that it has taken the necessary steps to address those challenges. So in the absence of that, we can all bet that come 2022,
August.
11th, 12th August, around that time, we will find ourselves in the same position that we found ourselves on 10th August. And so for all the stakeholders, and even when we are talking about the IEBC and the resourcing, it's not just IEBC, it's ensuring that all the actors in the electoral management process, be it the judiciary, the disputes tribunal, the registrar of political parties, all of them, the independent commissions. You asked a pertinent question here. Are we setting independent offices, IEBC, Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, to fail? And yet we know the very poignant role that they'll play during the election. So the issue is that ensuring that the whole electoral cycle, the electoral management system, all the actors are funded, that we learn and we take stock of the mistakes that existed in 2017, and we address them.
All right.
And that starts now,
Hold that thought, because my director is telling me we go on a short break. Before we go on that break, I told you about Kalonzo Musyoka. They'll be giving us their views from this particular... There's something that Kalonzo Musyoka said about IEBC. Let's take a listen.
domesticated this. No, nobody, Kenya is no longer an island. You can't kill your people and get away with it. Never again. You will not cause people to take up machetes, pangas, arrows and bows and arrows and kill each other in the name of getting elected to whatever office and get away with it.
Even if you bring another Chebukati by another name, the political players will contaminate that particular person you bring. That is why I say we need to change. We need to find a way of policing each other and stop attacking the commission every time.
And welcome back. Do you have confidence the IBC will conduct a transparent, free and fair election in 2022? Do you have confidence the IBC will conduct a transparent, free and fair elections in 2022? SMS us on 111 444 111 and on our social media handles, that is at Switch TV Kenya, at Fred Muitiriri. Now, somebody is saying here, let us have an IBC. Let us be on IBC for the first time. There is no need to postpone the 2022 election. I think the constitution is very clear on that. That is Honorable Oyugi Victor from Oyugi. Is that Oyugis? I think so. Abenge Oyando, you're saying, mutueke hii gumzo yote Facebook. Okay. Victor Olola, you're saying, show iko sawa. Betty Munyoki, you are calling me by my village. Hey. All right, thank you very much. Halligan Agade, thank you. You're saying, show ibebeza, asante sana. You're not giving us the feedback. Give us the feedback. All right. Quick reaction. Kevin, we'll start with you. You've seen what Wiper leader Kalonzo Musyoka said. Quick reaction on that.
Mheshimiwa Kalonzo Musyoka, as a very, as a citizen, I would have said he has very little moral authority to be demanding a lot of, responsibility from the citizens. Because he's a gentleman who's been a vice president and has also been a presidential candidate. And he's carved a very nice way of navigating between contending parties when it comes to presidential. And I'm saying this with a very angry spirit.
Yeah.
Because you cannot be telling Kenyans that we need to change, but when it gets to the space where, and he's talked about people losing lives because of elections, he has a space and the chance to ensure that we have strong laws to do what he's saying. Because this is a country that has also sent presidential candidates to the ICC, and they have come back and they're ruling. They're actually running a government. And it's a government for which you want to be part of. And no single person has been jailed and prosecuted for the lives of Kenyans that were lost because of an election. So I'm saying this, Frederick, because I respect Mheshimiwa like all the other people who sit to make laws. But I think with the same vigor, gusto, and zest that we use to expect a lot of rights, rather responsibilities from Kenyans, we should also be pushing the people who speak for Kenyans, particularly those who come from parties like Wiper, to ensure that we have strong laws so that when people do hate speech, they are arrested and prosecuted.
It's
and
politicians who are doing that.
Which is why I feel very cheated by what Mheshimiwa Kalonzo is saying, because under normal circumstances, Kenyans, we love each other. We sit together, we walk together until when we begin to have conversations around elections. And when people have cheated and Kenyans have been killed, we navigate around how to gain power, how to get positions without necessarily sitting back and asking, why are Kenyans dying because of elections? And elections is not anything, in my view, that, okay, let me say no single life, should be lost because of an election.
Absolutely.
The two leaders have the opportunity to put the right mechanisms in place. The 2022 elections are looking much more grimmer than 2007 and 2017, and now we have the space and chance to put the right mechanisms in office. And if we fail to do that, I think even what Mheshimiwa Martha Karua said would just be a mirage. That we need to begin with ourselves. How do we begin with ourselves when it is the people who are our leaders who are going out to incite us? They should begin by themselves.
Caroline.
Yes.
Mheshimiwa Kalonzo Musyoka was in the same conference that you two were in, Kevin excluded.
Yes.
You sat down and heard those sentiments. What do you make of them?
It takes us back to that same question of electoral justice. That what he's raising about, you know, Kenyans never having to die for elections or take arms against each other. But the question I think that ought to be asked is, why did we get there then in the first place? That's one. And two, have we addressed those issues? And if you ask me, the biggest challenge that continues to dog this country is the issue of impunity. And until we address those issues of impunity, those challenges that His Excellency, the former Vice President, is saying ought not to be there, will continue to be there. If you speak hate speech, you know, and nothing is done to you, and who does that hate speech? Where does that hate speech come from? It's from the politicians. Who incites the people? So the question then...
But you gave him the platform to say exactly what he said.
And
rather than asking him, what have you done?
And
as an opinion leader, what have you done?
And if you play the clip to the end, you will actually see that he made a commitment, because one of the things that we expected each political leader to do, including the civil society actors, was make certain commitments, public commitments. And if you play the clip to the end, you'll actually see that Kalonzo Musyoka committed his Wiper Party to ensuring that, one, they will not propagate violence nor hate speech. They will abide by the constitutional provisions. So if you ask me, and I want to tell you, Fred, you cannot address these issues in a silo. As civil society actors, we cannot sit down and speak to ourselves. We'll be preaching to the converted. What needs to happen, and what this country needs, is continuous dialogue. Civil society needs to talk to the political class. The political class needs to speak to us. And if you think about it, the whole conversation around these whole constitutional reforms has been centered on dialogue. And so we need to have these meetings where we are saying, look, as a political class, you're not playing well, you're not playing fair, you're not being reasonable, you're not being serving the interests or putting the country first. And they need to come and tell us, you know, as civil society, we feel you're not doing enough. Kevin here has just highlighted the issue of civic education, for example. Are we doing enough? Maybe that's what they need to tell us. But if you ask me, these are conversations that need to happen, and they need to happen now, so that, as I said at the beginning, we address those challenges. Yeah. So if, in my view, he was at the right place, at the right time, and needed to say the things that he said yesterday.
Marcus, you were in the same meeting. As ELOG, do you hold the thought that it has taken us almost 4 years to rethink what we are seeing right now, to right the wrongs that were done in 2017, and yet we have not even taken the first step? Did you put them to question, why are we waiting until the last year to do these changes?
Well, we have been pushing as ELOG, pushing the understanding, of course, the common sense understanding that elections are not an event, but are a process. So that there are phases to an election. So that election, the 8th of August is not just the election. I mean, there are many other processes that come before, come during, and come after. So the conversation around reforms, around learning from the previous exercises with a view of preparing better for the next one, ought to have started the moment we finished the last phase of election. But as Kenyans, as we know and as we do our things, we are last minute people, if you will. And so that's why all of a sudden we are learning that this law must be changed, this law must be changed, this law is okay, that policy must be reviewed. So we are providing a platform indeed. Of course, and as during the break we were discussing with you and Carol.
Yeah.
Since 2019, for instance, ELOG has been creating platforms in which we have been discussing electoral reforms, preparing...
Are these politicians, are they interested to hear, now that they were in the conversation, are they interested in these reforms?
Well, as Kara said, they made commitments. In the forum, we had the ODM party represented by Opiyo Wandayi, and they made commitments that in the public domain.
Yeah.
The Honorable Martha Karua made commitments on behalf of NARC Kenya. Of course, Ruto was represented by by the Honorable Susan.
Susan Kihika.
I quite don't remember if she made commitments on behalf of the DP, but they made commitments, those who speak. But
Yeah.
and I think for
Commitments.
commitments. And you see, let me tell you,
Commitments.
Fred, let me tell you the consequence of that conversation we had.
Yes.
First, it served two purposes. First is to create that conversation, just to bring them together. But also those commitments.
Isn't it too late?
It's not, well, it's too late, but it's never too late to start from somewhere. So those commitments then will become the basis upon which we will judge them. So we have agreed and have made commitments, and we will do follow-ups as civil society organization to ensure that those commitments are followed to their logical conclusion.
Let's hear what Kenyans are saying. Let us have Kenya Bila Uchaguzi initiative is the way to go. Public service governance is promoting the initiative to completely eradicate elections in our governance. All right, Jeffrey from Rongai, here in Kenya, I totally doubt election transparency. Never will it happen. The other one is saying your number ends with 340. They're saying yes, we'll have an election that is free, fair, and transparent. But Kevin, before that, we have a bite by Wafula Chebukati so that we can have another conversation about boundaries review. Let's hear what Wafula Chebukati is saying about this.
We're looking at the matter in court in the Court of Appeal, and as far as the commission is concerned, this matter is sub judice, and we cannot possibly, as a commission, now plan on a matter which is in court and say this is what we shall do or this is not what we shall do. I think, in all fairness, our planning and the election, the boundaries operation plan is based on the legal framework which we have and the practical issues which we have as a commission.
Let me start with you, Kevin. And you've heard of Wafula Chebukati. He's putting everything as a doubt. We are doubting that we are going to review the boundaries. We are doubting that we are going to have an election. We are doubting that we have enough money. Are we going to see a chaotic 2022 election? Are we headed to where we were in 2007?
If we are not careful, we will have a scenario which would probably be much more difficult than 2007. And remember that three things come to mind before probably I get into the boundaries review. We have governors, almost half of the governors, as we were discussing during the break, are serving their second term, so they are going home. Somebody would ask, what do you do with them? Of course, constitutionally, you go home and you take care of your chicken and your cows.
Are you going to go home?
That's the other question. So what then would be their role in terms of either putting in place offices that would then serve their interests through those particular offices, so supporting whichever candidates. Number two, you have a very aggressive, I would say ambitious deputy president, which is not what we had in 2007, who has declared that is running for office as president. And so you also have the kind of scenarios that we are seeing in Parliament, Senate and National Assembly, where alliances are forming. Sitting parliamentarians are propagating policies of other parties which did not take them to Parliament. In fact, by law, both the Constitution and the Political Parties Act, they should have resigned, and then we go for by-elections. That is not happening.
Resignation.
And so you get back to what Mheshimiwa Wafula Chebukati is saying, which is about boundaries. Article, is it 87 or 89 of the Constitution is very clear. You cannot have reviews 2 years to an election.
Yes.
Number two, Kriegler report gave us a very pinpointed recommendations that also had to do with boundaries. And why I also sympathize and at the same time empathize with the chair is because you are supposed to be adjudicating matters which are actually in court. As he says, is sub judice. You cannot do anything about it because you don't know whether the BBI process will be fully annulled by the Court of Appeal or they will give it a go ahead. And so if they say the BBI process is constitutional and that the president and the entire team, the promoters, did the right thing, what do? Do you begin to plan for
A referendum.
for a referendum, then for boundaries review, and then you have
For an
elections,
election.
which is why, Fred, it is important that Kenyans are speaking to each other. Because when we speak, then we're able to have collective solutions to our common problems, because that is purely where we are at right now. And as I said at the beginning, if we get to a level where we have to take this thing back to Bunge and tell parliamentarians, okay, now we have to, postpone elections. Now, I don't think, right now they are saying we must have elections, but when that point in time comes, I am sure all of them will say, hey, thank
it's
God.
okay.
Yeah, we can actually even have it in 2025. That now disenfranchises Kenyans, because how we get our leaders, and that affects both the national and county level elections. Then what do we do with what the sovereignty of the people, which is supposed to be exercised either directly or indirectly? Directly, rather indirectly, by having new people into office to
Every
ensure
5
service
years.
delivery, to ensure that the interests of the citizens are being captured. So we are at quite a different, rather difficult point in time, and I am hoping that God's will is going to be done.
Oh Lord, now we are on hope. Okay, this is what Alfred Mutua had to say about boundaries.
Tumekuwa tukisema ya kwamba watu wanataka boundaries, new boundaries. Where the constitution says in section 85, nafikiri 1, 2, inasema ya kwamba na hata 3, boundaries should be regular within 8 years hawezi badilisha, lakini within 12 years wanapasa kuwa wana mfumo wa kuweza kuongeza boundaries, kuongeza constituencies na zingine. Mimi sijaona mkutano wote wa IEBC kutaja mambo kama hayo. Kwa hivyo mimi naona conspiracy hapa.
Alfred Mutua anaona conspiracy ya kutokuwa na new constituencies. In any case, IEBC is saying that maybe 26 constituencies will be scrapped off, but we are not even ready for it. Are we telling Kenyans that they do not matter? Because this touches to the core of the constitution by the people. Are we telling them they do not matter?
So the beauty about the Kenyan 2020 constitution is that 2010 constitution
It is well.
is that it anticipated a lot of these challenges that we are speaking about. And so, for example, on the issue of the boundaries review, it gives the commission up to 2024, because 8 years from the last one, we have until 2024.
March 2024.
Yes. So so the question then becomes, must we do it now? And what the chairperson is saying is that there is still time, and I don't think we need to tie the two to the elections. And by the way, he has provided clarity on the issue of the 26 constituencies. That's number one. Number two, on the issue of parliament and maybe perhaps an extension of its term, that's also anticipated. And the constitution is very clear that the term of parliament and therefore any other office can only be extended in a time of war. And even then, it sets a limit of 12 months.
Are we in the time of war?
We are not. No. So those things were foreseen. And why were they foreseen by the drafters of the constitutions? Because they understood where we came from in 2007. A third difference between now and 2007 is that the incumbent was running then. In 2022, the incumbent's term is coming to an end. And I think we'll be creating a very bad precedent if we started a narrative around identifying roles for outgoing governors. In any institution, you serve your contractual term, you leave, and you look for another job. And therefore, whether there are 24 of them, whether they're half of the 47 counties, they are at liberty to look for other offices. No one has stopped any governor from running for MP. From seeking a cabinet position, from going to the corporate sector, from running for president. So I don't think
our politicians. Are you talking about our politicians?
Yes, those politicians who are part of
God
our communities.
Be with you, like Kevin is saying.
but Fred, I think the thing is we must normalize serving our terms and going home. We must
not in Africa.
We must. That's number one.
Yes.
We must normalize because if we do that, then also our delivery of services to the people will actually be informed by our legacy, not in terms of insisting that I must stay in office so that I can continue amassing or doing what these politicians do. And if we do that, then in 2022, the question we ought then to be having is, what are these things that we must address to make sure that we do not have a repeat of 2007? And part of the current constitutional dispensation was to make sure that we don't have that winner takes it all. That's why we have devolution. We were supposed to demystify this big office at the national level by devolving, so that now you as a citizen, you feel I have a governor, and
who
therefore
who
is representing me. Services are closer to me. Proximity, public participation.
Yes.
I have a voice in the way a county is run, and therefore cumulatively from the 47 counties, public participation and public voice is heard and contributes to the national level.
Hold that thought.
Yes.
Let me get some reaction from those who are viewing us. Nyabi Hillary, you are saying, Fred, tipping point, what only we Kenyans want is a good leader, not good political party or alliances. Napenda sana mjadala. Brenda Saina, you are saying the show is on point, and my director is telling me that we are running out of time. But I'll put to you this question. Now, we are looking at, if we do not put enough policy, we don't have enough policies, we have not put enough work into going into 2022, it will be chaotic. What do we need to do to avert that?
Well, as you just said rightly, we need to, I mean, the IBC conducted its post-2017 audit on how it performed. We have a number of civil society organizations that have also done the same. I mean, the report is out there. What must be done is out there. What must be done must be done. I mean, in brief, let's do what must be done to be able to deliver a credible process. And it is in the public domain. We have electoral laws that must be reviewed. We have very crucial bills in Parliament that must be passed before that election. I mean, for instance, the funding of institutions that Caro was speaking about. Let us fund and build the capacities of every institution to do their mandate. And lastly, let the Kenyan voter fully participate into the process. But also, there is this issue that I want to speak to Kevin, the issue of bad manners. I mean, bad manners in the country.
And give me 20 seconds to talk about bad manners.
Bad manners goes the leadership and the people. I mean, these guys come to us because they are bad-mannered. We encourage them. But also because we are bad-mannered, we don't see the problem. And so that there should be a paradigm shift. There should be an ethical, conversion. Some rage within ourselves.
Some soul to Paul conversion.
Conversion within and that is critical for this country.
All right. Thank you so very much, Marcus. Now, few SMSs before we wind up. Kenyans want the law to rule, and the lawbreakers must face it and put in prison no matter who he or she is. Wanjiko has said no more general elections in Kenya. Tumechoka. Utaki elections? Hey. We always have Bora elections, not elections Bora, and we'll never election Bora. Whatever you've said, thank you so very much. Politics has become so expensive that it takes a lot of money even to be defeated by Will Rogers. All right, the views expressed in this show are solely individual views and do not portray the views of Switch TV. Thank you so very much, Marcus Agenga. That is your name, right?
Correct.
All right, Caroline Gaita.
Correct.
All right, from Zalendo Trust, from ELOG, and of course, Kevin Osindo, who comes from County's Governance Watch. Thank you so very much for having time for Tipping Point tonight. My name is Frederick Mwitiriri. Our sign language interpreters tonight, Tracy Dorcas and Teresia Washira. From myself, it's a good night.
Thank you.